Hey everyone, thanks for filtering in and joining us here. My name is Luke Hopping. I'm with Micromobility Industries. We're a blog, pod, newsletter, events company that covers the future of urban mobility by lightweight electric vehicles. In that realm, we spend a lot of time talking about cars and cities and travel and patterns in general. It's with my great pleasure here today that I'm going to introduce this panel of really wonderful experts who are going to talk to you a little bit about what the return of cars and car-based commerce may mean or may not mean for the future of cities. In just 1 second, I'm going to hop off and get out of the way so the conversation can commence. But to begin, I want to introduce our really wonderful moderator, Liem Beckett, who is the editor of Restaurant Dive, which is it's like a daily digital business publication really geared towards executives and operators, giving insight into sort of the ever-changing world of restaurants, which, as this conference is all about, is changing exponentially faster these days. So her work covers kind of the critical intersection of AI drive-through technology to the rise of third-party delivery to COVID-19's impact on the industry, all things you've probably heard us cover here today and yesterday and will continue to cover in this conversation. And then prior to that, she was an associate editor of Food Dive, which is also highly relevant to some of the programming here today, given our big focus on restaurants as sort of the key performance indicators of the health of the city's economy. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump off and let her get the conversation going and introduce everybody. Thank you all for joining us, and please do feel free to drop questions into the chat. I know Emma will be taking them. Just make sure you hit the sessions tab on the chat rather than event. All right, everybody, talk soon.
Great, thanks, Luke. And hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel, where for the next hour, we'll be hearing from car business leaders about how the pandemic has impacted the car-based economy, new opportunities that are arising in this market is changing consumer behavior, and how some of these new concepts could impact. We're joined today by Jackie Gonzalez, the founder and creative director of Cinemauto, an immersive drive-in experience, as well as Scott Fitsimones, the co-founder of AirGarage, a modern parking solution, and Michael Manion, the CEO of Kitchen Podula, which provides custom modular ghost kitchen and drive solutions for customers. And before we dive into questions today, I'd like to give each of our panelists a moment to share a little bit more about how it works. Jackie, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So I'm Jackie Gonzalez, creative director and founder of Cinemauto. And we are the organization that is bringing thoughtful, immersive drive-in screening experiences, supporting local restaurants, local businesses, and just re-energizing neighborhoods throughout Los Angeles. Our first season started off in Chinatown, but we are looking to expand to other cities in the coming months. So our goal with Cinemauto is to amplify marginalized community stories through art, while we give back to those affected by COVID.
Great, thanks. And Scott, can you share more about AirGarage?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Scott, and I am the co-founder of a company called AirGarage. So AirGarage is a full stack parking operator. So what that means is we basically do everything that is required to run a parking lot or garage. So kind of for context, that means everything from signage to enforcement, on-the-ground operations to the digital presence, basically everything it takes to turn a parking lot into a full-fledged parking operation. And kind of throughout the pandemic, we've been exploring what that really means and what other use cases there really are for the parking spaces. But more on that later.
Great, thanks, Scott. And Michael, can you tell us more about Kitchen Podula?
Yes, my name is Michael Manion. I'm the CEO of Kitchen Podula. We build modular pods with kitchens in them and bars for QSR and enterprise brands, as well as large liquor companies.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Finally, before we get started, I want to let everyone know who just logged in that we will be holding time at the end of the session for a Q&A. You can submit your questions in the chat function to the right of your screen. Please make sure that you have the chat function set to session and not event. And you can feel free to send questions starting right now. I'll try and get to as many of your questions as I can at the end of the session. And now, without further ado, let's get started. I have a question for Scott to start us off. Scott, we know that commuter traffic has dropped off during the pandemic. Americans they're still driving about 15% less this year than they did in 2019. How has this shift in consumer behavior impacted the parking?
Yeah. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I think parking revenues were down, astronomically. We were probably down 70 to 80%, as people stopped parking. And our portfolio of parking garages is largely centered in downtowns and near universities. And so obviously that was a really massive hit to the industry. And I think, there are many different pros and cons to that. One of the cons is that our revenue's down, but one of the pros is that there's kind of an unprecedented shakeup in the industry where we've seen that there are a lot more parking contracts available. Suddenly, landlords, property owners, and these real estate investment trusts are suddenly very interested in these other opportunities, especially these non-parking opportunities to make money with their parking lots. And so, we've spoken to and we've signed contracts with dozens of customers on the premise of, we're going to sell parking, but we're also going to make money in alternative ways. For example, hosting drive-in movies and, basically collecting rent from food truck owners and farmers market owners and things like that. And so we've kind of been exploring how we can increase our portfolio of alternative uses. And also to add to that, just from a purely, from an urbanist perspective, we really don't want to, just enable more cars to be parked, right? The goal of our company is to think about how we can use these spaces in higher and more leveraged ways. So for example, food trucks and these drive-in movies and things just are probably a higher value use case of this land than private car storage. And that trend has definitely been accelerated, and we're very excited about that.
Mm-hmm. Great. And even though we're seeing the average consumer use their car less, commute to work, their offices are seeing new opportunities around cars and changing relationships between consumers and their vehicles as an opportunity for experience. And Jackie, I'm interested in hearing from you about whether you think that changing relationship with seeing the car as an opportunity for experience is something that will remain in the post-pandemic environment.
Yeah, I think from being on lockdown, the relationship with one's car has changed. I know that during the beginning of the lockdown, there was nowhere to go, so cars became more of a friend rather than a foe, sitting in traffic. Now it's just a form of escape. So I think that I certainly took that inspiration when kind of ideating the concept for Cinemauto, was just to create an in-car experience that would just basically provide a cultural escape from people, and also just to get away from the digital events and computer screens. So I definitely think that right now and in the coming months, and maybe the beginning and mid of next year, whenever we're still just engaging in cars, we are very connection starved. So I think that people will still be using their cars a lot more to go on road trips or go to the drive-in or go to any sort of event that involves being in a car.
Mm-hmm. And to Scott's point that parking space can be opportunities for new use cases like drive-ins and other eating opportunities, how have you been using Cinemauto to connect with other businesses like restaurants that you partner with to really optimize the space and bring as much community experience as possible to your?
Yeah, so with Cinemauto, we provide a full immersive experience, and we are supporting neighborhood restaurants. So currently, we are utilizing a parking lot in Chinatown for all of our events. And we are working with neighborhood restaurants to provide the food. So we eliminated the whole concession stand and are curating meal boxes that come with the ticket. So essentially it's dinner and a movie. And the way that we are getting the food to the people is via car hop delivery. So kind of just putting a modern take on the concept that was used back in the 50s and 60s.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And so working with local vendors, just supporting local artists, local filmmakers, just to kind of re-energize the city and also stimulate the local economy.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Michael, I have a similar question for you. We've seen drive-through really spike over the past months during the pandemic as diners are interested in convenient ways of getting their meals and a more contactless experience dining indoors or patio seating. Do you think that that change in behavior that we're seeing, that increase in drive traffic, is something that will be a permanent shift for the rest of the place?
It's kind of a loaded question. Yes and no. I mean, none of like Jackie was saying, you know, it's different change when we're in our cars now. We don't mind sitting in drive-throughs. I've been designing a lot of pods with drive-throughs in them, and almost every one of them, I happily insist that they put a pickup window inside of it, maybe even with a pickup cabinet, so it's totally touchless. You can scan your phone, the cabinet opens up, and you can grab your food and walk away. As it's changed switches, we have everything goes back. Are we going to want to sit in drive-throughs, or are we going to start taking Ubers and Lyfts again a lot? Mm-hmm. You know, and you don't want to go. You will go to that pickup window and grab your food and then call a Lyft and take it home. So I think there's a pretty big balance to both of those. Yes, now we actually make a addendum that goes like for big box restaurants. They have like a 6-foot curb, and we made a pod that fits right on that curb, and they put a hole in their wall. So now they can just make any building a drive-through or a pickup. Mm-hmm. A little skinny pod that goes on the curb, and you can do a single or double window, and they can make a building that you couldn't have a drive-through or a pickup window. You can do that now. I'm going to say 50-50. You need both.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, I think it's really interesting that you're able to give restaurants that under normal circumstances may not have enough real estate available to build out a traditional drive-through. I could see that being a way to level the playing field for smaller operators that don't have the space or infrastructure in place to do a traditional former drive-through build out. Do you see that as one of the primary objectives of your business, is bringing this model that has typically been associated with major QSRs and leveling the playing field for independent businesses that want to channel?
So yes and no. I mean, it's whoever wants it. I haven't seen the trickle down to more to the independent or the food truck people. We pretty much do live in the major chains for whatever reason. We try to do with a multiple scale of many locations at the same time. Can it even the playing field? Yes, but then we're working with third-party hosted kitchens that maybe they'll have 5 or 6 pods, and so they would be bringing smaller brands in, or maybe really good like restaurants in New York, Chicago, and putting them in and they'll pick up the food from there and bring it to the expedite pod to deliver it to the customer. Okay. So I'm seeing both of those.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I'm also curious, we've seen over the past few weeks a lot of major restaurants make announcements that they're rolling out delivery-only formats as a way to lower overhead costs and really expand their off-premise footprint. Are you seeing that as a burgeoning opportunity in the restaurant space to return to QSR's roots of formats without dining rooms and with only drive-through?
And that was kind of our thing. We've been telling everybody for years, you don't need dining room. Mm-hmm. Hindsight. I mean, it takes employees to run our pods, full kitchen. Most of them are from, say, 330 square feet to 600 square feet. And that's just a raw kitchen. It's actually pretty big. And then you can do like an internal or external walk-in cooler, freezer, whatever you need. But that cook line is set up if 30 to 40% of your revenue is coming from delivery right now, we're the hub and spoke. So I truly believe you should have sit-down restaurants, 100%. But like if a traditional QSR costs 1.2 to 1.4 million to build, then you can build that in the most iconic places in a city. And what you want to do is hub and spoke it with delivery pods around that city, close to your customer, like in strip malls and ancillary parking lots like Scott. So your customer can call it and cook the. So that's the goal, is to the customer at a lower cost, so you can afford all the ancillary other costs to go along with delivery. But if your rent's cheaper, pod's cheaper, your staffing's cheaper, your food costs are the same, you can afford to spend to open up a lot more of them for the same price as one other one and expand your reach.
Interesting.
Yeah, and can I add to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, something we've kind of thought about this too in our parking lots of like, enabling, a food truck or a kitchen pod to have like a dining area. And it's kind of interesting because, the unit economics are, clearly work well for a delivery pod that takes up a couple parking spaces, because it can, basically if a parking space makes, $100 a day or whatever, a delivery pod can almost certainly make more. But like, as you think about making it like a dine-in experience, now you're taking up more and more parking real estate. And so sometimes it's a matter of like, is that real estate actually best used by the diners? And like, is that actually a good experience for diners to want to dine in a parking lot? And maybe in some areas of the city, I think it can work, but then some areas probably not great for a dine-in experience.
So we actually have an answer.
And can I answer that
Yeah,
too?
go ahead.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Michael, that, when I first was thinking of this whole like Cinemauto idea, I was looking for something very similar to what you offer, because just with the rules with COVID and having kitchens and build outs, there's a lot of rules behind that where you can't have more than like 2 people in a spot. So I think it's the perfect answer, and that way bringing something that wouldn't necessarily live with the whole delivery from restaurant to car, I think it's a great solution for that, to open up the more fine dining options.
And so back to speak to Scott and to Jackie on doing movie theaters, and as far as using your lots, we kind of have an answer to both of those. We put rooftop patios on our pods, AstroTurf, grass, seating. Out of 350 square feet, like out of 8.5 by 40, I can give you a walk-in cooler, 3-compartment sink, hand sink, all your cook line, a pickup window, a drive-through, and a rooftop patio.
Wow, that's very efficient.
Totally comfortable. We actually just built one of these for Middleby that's going to have robots making pizzas for L2F. That is this model. And it would work great for movie theaters to be on top of something watching it, as well as the square footage, because it means so much in major cities. Plus, it's pretty cool eating on top. It's fun. They have nice railings that fold down and everything else. So it makes it more of an experience no matter where you are.
Interesting. And taking a bit of a pivot, Jackie, I have a question for you. How can we make drive-ins accessible to people without cars? And I'm curious if you're thinking about in the future, when the pandemic is less of a concern and cases are lower and car sharing is more of an opportunity, if you are thinking about business solutions for Cinemauto where that can be part of the experience. So people who either do not have a car can be participating, or people who are looking to, reduce their carbon footprint by carpooling, car sharing, how that can be possible.
Yeah, so in an effort to be more inclusive and accessible, I think that companies like Maven, who unfortunately is no longer in business, would have been perfect for this. For the people that don't have cars, to rent a car for a day, invite their friends. Also, it reduces the carbon footprint, right? And especially with drive-ins, like we are only able to accommodate 126 cars. There are people with a bigger footprint, but that's all that we can have. So we can accommodate more people. and, less cars if people car share, or as we're able to maybe come out of the cars right now with COVID rules, nobody's allowed out of their cars unless they're coming to and from the restroom. So even just with the food or anything that we have in our community market, everything needs to be delivered to the cars. So once this kind of lifts, we are hoping to allow maybe like lawn chairs or, kind of just work a different idea for the people without cars up in the front with lawn chairs to also enjoy the experience. And kind of going back to Michael, where the whole build out, I mean, it's just going to evolve, as time progresses. It'll get better.
Absolutely. And for people, entrepreneurs in other markets that are looking to start something like Cinemauto, that's a more modern take on the drive-in experience, what's your suggestion for getting started? What type of investment was needed, permitting, things of that nature?
Yeah, so I think one of the most challenging parts of getting everything this off the ground, like drive-ins concepts off the ground, is definitely location and permits. When I was first looking into potential spots, I mean, I was thinking of empty parking lots at Home Depot, at, just malls, zoos, stadiums, like everywhere. I would just drive and say, oh, there's a great location that looks like it can accommodate cars. So unfortunately, no one was in the office in the city. I must have left 50 plus voicemails all over LA, just kind of wondering, hey, where can I rent this? Or, just trying to get more information. So it's definitely the location and the permitting. Were my two biggest challenges, I think, when starting this. So yeah, it's just pretty much just, looking into that, doing some research. And then I think it's a little bit easier now, just because I feel like during the beginning, a lot of people were a little resistant to hosting something like this, or even just sponsoring or partnering with a drive-in concept. But I think now it's a little bit easier. And there are a lot of stores that have realized that their parking lots can be turned into a drive-in experience for customer, just a different channel for them to market their products or make additional money, give people in their stores, sort of like what the Walmarts are doing, just using their own parking lots as a way to create an experience for customers.
Great. And jumping off that, Scott, I know you mentioned earlier in our conversation some use cases for parking lots that are emptier right now. What are the best use cases that you've found over the past few months to really optimize that space for community use?
Yeah, that's a good question. And as a company, we are vigorously trying to find out what that best use case is. And we kind of have treated the last few months as basically time to experiment and learn a lot of lessons. And basically like some of the lessons we have learned are one is we had run some drive-in movies ourselves, and it seems like Jackie has definitely created a much more legitimate operation. We were basically just doing it very low key, had sent emails to some of our users and saying, hey, we're doing a drive-in movie. For us, the pain points were definitely the logistics of we had an inflatable screen, and part of the problem is our parking lots are in downtowns and places where people needed them during the day. So we were in this situation where we'd set up the logistics for the movie at night, and then we'd have to take down the screen and figure out how to get projectors and the licensing and fees. And so I think that it was just pretty hard for us to continually make money off that endeavor while trying to also operate a commercial paid parking lot. And I think the model of delivery has been, it works pretty well because it's on autopilot. So for example, we can just tell a food truck owner hey, this is your parking spot. And something that we've kind of been working out with new food truck owners as a value proposition is, most food trucks don't have addresses, but if they're in an AirGarage parking lot, suddenly they can have an address, right? And kind of forming a more permanent relationship. And if they have an address, suddenly they're eligible for, listing on Uber Eats and DoorDash and things like that. So I think that model is definitely going to keep growing. And then the question kind of becomes with that of like, what are the unit economics of, this is something we're figuring out internally of like, okay, how many food trucks could a given parking lot support? What are the economics of that? Is there a future where a parking lot isn't actually just used for parking anymore? It's just, we're going to pack in 12 food trucks and, people could, either we'll create like a community space where people can eat and pick up and eat there, or we'll just make them all cloud kitchens to save space and, things like that. So definitely we're exploring the possibilities on that front. And those are kind of the main use cases we've been exploring.
That innovation is exciting because, as all of you have mentioned, I think people are starved for experience right now. And so finding ways to bring people together and really optimize the space in our cities, I think is great right now. I have a question from the audience based on Jackie's comments. The writer says, sounds like what people really want is to mix meals and entertainment. Even before COVID, how many times did you decide to get delivery instead of go out so you could watch Netflix? Their question is, are we heading toward a world with delivery streaming bundle?
That's actually pretty good.
Yeah, and this is open to anyone who answer.
Headed to a world with, I'm looking at it right now. Are we headed towards a world with delivery streaming bundles? I mean, yeah, obviously the idea for drive-ins is to get out of your house, have an experience, there's always like the Netflix and chill, and, there are ways of maybe doing that prior, but I do think that you definitely partnering up with a restaurant or, a small business and, partnering up with like a streaming service or something to offer that in home. Definitely. I think that's also an option.
Yeah. John Norris, that was brilliant. Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm imagining like you pull up your Netflix and you're about to watch Stranger Things, and then it says like 10% off your Uber Eats order.
Yeah, I mean, there's also curated experiences that come to your door. I think that there was someone that was doing a Halloween one where they delivered a spooky box of I think it was just like a curated meal with spooky drinks or something. So it's out there. There are people trying to get a little bit more creative with like the whole delivery, just to bring the experience to you.
And Jackie, you're already selling your experience as a bundle, correct? Where the ticket price and the food is all together.
Yeah, so I, really worked, really kind of just trying to curate like a really great experience with UX, UI, just trying to say, okay, we want to make sure that we support all of these local restaurants and businesses, and we want to make it super easy where people don't have to wait in line. My whole thing was about safety, right? So I was trying to avoid any contact whatsoever with, just anyone on site with like a concession stand or any interaction. So I wanted to make it easy where you book your ticket, you book your date, you pick your meal. So we have 4 different options. We have vegetarian, we have meat, pork, just like, it's LA, so we have to have options. Accessible for all. So people can select from 4 different meal options. And we also have some local businesses selling agua frescas. So Chella's is kind of curating these cold brew or horchata drinks. So it's just basically super easy. You just kind of go in, you select your meal, everything is ready for you. So when you check in, we know exactly what you pre-ordered. And then we stick it on your car. And then once everyone comes around, they look at what you ordered, and then everything comes and gets delivered to your vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So it's a packaged experience.
Mm-hmm.
We provide it all right there.
Great. And pivoting a bit, before the pandemic, cities across the country were making really concerted efforts to encourage car sharing, to make sure that cars are as efficient as possible, to reduce our impact on climate. And I'm curious what you all think if drive-throughs and drive-ins continue to be a real point of interest for consumers going forward. What could the implications be on city congestion and also on the climate overall?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Oh, go ahead.
You want to take it?
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, Americans are certainly kind of addicted to their cars, and I think that there's always going to be demand for drive-throughs. I am kind of optimistic and hoping that, this is kind of a short-term thing. You see your car as this like protective bubble from the pandemic, but after the vaccine, I actually think most Americans really don't like their cars as much as they think. And I think commuting, for example, is one of the most stressful things. So I'm optimistic that kind of post-pandemic we'll have, less frustrated people commuting, clogging our freeways. We'll have, more demand for open spaces and shared spaces on our streets. And, San Francisco and New York are already leading the way and kind of, removing parking and replacing that with, outdoor dining and things like that. And, I think that, overall I am long cities. And I think that as cities get more and more congested, people will become more frustrated and demand better pedestrian infrastructure. But perhaps that's wishful thinking.
The cities are not going to allow it. They're only going to allow so many, and they're going to have moratoriums, just like anything else. They're only going to allow so much congestion somewhere. And if you like a typical queue is like from 6 cars to like maybe like Dutch Brothers where a queue is like 50 cars. It just depends, right? So you have to. It's all about the flow of the traffic, and I do believe as soon as we can start really driving again, that people are going to go inside, and that's going to balance out. You've never seen lines at drive-throughs like you do now. And those two are just going to balance out again. I mean, we had it before, we'll have it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because now we don't mind waiting in our cars in line.
Yeah.
Well,
there's not many other options. Yeah. I think that's a good point that once dining in becomes more comfortable for people and, more widespread across the country, we could see effects there. Mm-hmm.
As soon as it's safe.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question from the audience. Reminder to viewers that you can send questions in the chat function to the writing machine. Just make sure that your chat is not sent, and we'll. But this question is: in a world that's increasingly contactless, how do we build empathy toward service workers so they aren't made invisible? So, does anybody have any comments on that?
It's a rough one to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I tell my daughter to stay in school and learn everything she can, otherwise to program robots, otherwise she's going to be working for them. That's the world we're living in, a very fast-paced world that everything is super advanced. And our service workers are the backbone of America, and they're the ones that make everything run. I think they should make more money, especially since they're the ones that are working right now to get us through the hard times.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenging time.
And contactless delivery has definitely been, I remember kind of the first time getting contactless delivery, it feels, very magical that it's like, wow, like this food just appeared outside our doors. But it's also definitely removes the human element from, when someone's handing you that, bag of food that they've, kept warm in their car, I think you're more likely to leave them a tip and say thank you, and it feels more human. So, I don't exactly know how we can build empathy, but, it's a good question for sure.
I think it's even just with people in general. I remember when we first went on lockdown, neighbors in the neighborhood that typically say hello or anything, they're just like afraid to even go near you, you know? So I hope that everybody kind of goes back to, I mean, I don't know, I'm a hugger, so that's just me, but I hope that we can go back to a world where, you know, we're okay and comfortable with being around strangers.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. And like we were just talking about, it's a challenging time for service workers, a challenging time for businesses, and many small businesses are worried that things will get worse for weather to creep in, and that changes in consumer behavior from what we're seeing right now. How should car-based businesses that are in climates that are cooler be preparing for winter? And do you all think that the winter weather will bring any significant changes in consumer behavior?
I think it's going to continue. I think it's people, you know, because the flu and everything else. I think people are going to buckle up even more. Be afraid to, you know, we can't, like all the great things that New York and San Francisco are doing for dining outside. San Francisco, you'll still be able to do it because the client's the same all year round. But in New York, it's a whole different ballgame. You're not going to eat outside when it's raining and snowing or whatever, you know, really cold. So it's going to be interesting. I think that the restaurants are set up to be able to handle it now is the difference. At first, they got beat up because they didn't know how to deal with this. They didn't know how to staff for it. They couldn't. The supplies weren't there. I think that we're ready to be able to handle winter. And I don't think it's going to, like, as far as the food delivery goes, I don't think it's going to disrupt anything. I think it will just be businesses just going on for everything we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. And Mike,
Yeah, from the parking perspective, we found that winter traffic is usually just slightly down because, you know, I think there might be some more people who decide to drive, but like the net effect is, you know, more people just stay at home. So, you know, we'll just see a slight decrease over winter probably.
Yeah. I only think from like the drive-in experience, I'm like, oh, obviously being in LA, I don't think anything will change. It's just that I think maybe more people might invest in jumper cables because there are a lot of cars, the batteries that die. We've seen like 1 to 2 every screening where, you know, it's actually really interesting that it's the newer vehicles that the battery dies. So I think that might be something, you know, jumper cable sales might go up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. We have another question from the audience. We've seen a lot of cities allocate space in parking lanes and city streets for restaurants to expand their outdoor dining. When the pandemic winds down, do we think that there's going to be tension in whether or not that space is better used for parking for commuters or for extended restaurants? Do you guys foresee any obstacles there with hashing out how that figures out?
Yeah, there is already tension. I can guarantee in San Francisco, people want their lanes back. But I think the best thing cities can do is to promise that these parklets are permanent because it will encourage investment in the parklets. So for example, San Francisco botched the program by saying your parklets can only go until December 31st. So what did this do? It disincentivized restaurants from opening outdoor operations because they didn't want to invest in something fleeting and temporary. So they've actually revised it, and they've said that you can have the parklets till 2022. But I'm hoping that, you know, our cities have become really beautiful, actually. And it's kind of very European feeling when you're walking down the streets and people are dining on the streets. It's beautiful. And I really hope that pedestrians and you know, city people who live here will see, wow, why would we go back to, you know, free car storage on the side of streets when we could have this, you know, beautiful outdoor dining experience?
I agree with that. And actually, I know that the city of West Hollywood was looking to implement closing off certain streets maybe once a month. Number one, because they saw the change when everyone was at home, no one was driving, skies were clear, smog was down. And so in an effort to kind of encourage people not to drive as much, because in West Hollywood, you see the whole like European feel with people like, dining on the streets. And they're looking to implement something once a month where they close off certain streets. So I think that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Because I know that we've seen in New York City, they've made their open streets program permanent. I think it'll be interesting to see if we see more legislation like that, where there are either monthly events to keep that space open and keep that European feel, bringing the community together, or for longer term solutions.
Yeah.
And we have another question. As customer expectations drift more and more toward delivery, what brick and mortar segment is in the most danger of being
destroyed? Anybody with too high of overhead. If you have a huge dining room and you need so many staff to run it, and somebody can move in next door to you and be thinner, faster, smoother, do better online marketing, they're going to crush it.
Yeah.
And Michael, jumping off of that, do you see drive-through as really being kind of table stakes for the restaurant space now? Like we mentioned before, it used to be really just an asset that QSRs had access to. But with solutions like yours, is this going to become more and more of a standard consumer expectation?
So if you look at where chain stores came from, like the first chain restaurant ever was like White Castle in America. They were like a walk up, buy your food thing. You look at like even like Sonic now where they bring the food to the car, or if you've seen like McDonald's story, it was a walk up window to it. I do believe, and I think the stats are that walk up is actually bigger than delivery. I think that drive through is like we're stuck in our cars. Like I don't want to get out. I want to feel safe. But I can see somebody living in Jersey, taking the train from New York, getting off the train, going to a walk up window, grabbing their food that they ordered it on the train, and going home and feeding it to their family. I think that type of thing happening. So it's a toss-up. I think that it's another segment of the market that just expands the reach to the customer, and it's the involvement of restaurants. Like big dining rooms, big box restaurants, just like big box stores, unless you're Walmart, they're dead. Like it's all about being smaller, thinner, closer to your customer, faster experience, get whatever you need delivered within a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And what kind of new technologies are you seeing coming to the drive-through channel? And do you think will be the best way for restaurants now that there are so many drive-throughs that are being added in both QSR chains and fast casual chains? These restaurants will be competing against each other. What sort of assets are the best way to really?
I guess this is good for me a little bit, but I see like anything from like when you go to the bank and you have a giant tube that sucks your money, like they're doing delivery like that with food now. A lot of the voice recognition is actually like robotics type stuff where it's speech activated. They're making drive-through lanes like Chick-fil-A phenomenal. I mean, It's a race track to get in there. You kind of swerve around and they split everything. You pay for it. Your food's ready when you go out. It's so efficient. So I think that the biggest technologies are getting you in and out as fast as possible. I mean, it's really a science to it, and they're taking a lot more real estate for the drive-through so you can get in and out of the queue a lot faster.
Mm-hmm. And to that point of efficiency, are the restaurants that you're working with, are they interested in solutions for drive-through that are mobile? So instead of taking orders at the drive-through, orders online or mobile phone, and it's really just.
So the answer is yes and no. Okay, so like if we build like a single pod that's just one brand, by all means, that's perfect for a drive-through. But if we're gonna put like a pod hub where there's 6 or 7 of them, how are you know, everybody's food drops, it's all made at a different time. Somebody gets in the wrong lane. So in that circumstance, maybe we have, again, like the model I told you before, an expedite pod that the food gets run to that pod and everything's picked up from that pod instead of the individual restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a chicken and the egg. Like, I don't think that once you put multiple restaurants together, drive-thrus are almost impossible.
Mm-hmm.
There's just too many different variables there.
Mm-hmm.
But taking that food and expediting it to the pickup pod is easy to do. And then it's just kind of like going back to a Sonic model where the food's this, or even Jackie's model where they bring the food to the customer, which is actually the most efficient.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And we have another question from the audience. This is a little bit more lighthearted. What are some of the coolest car-based businesses and pop-ups that you've seen arise? If there are any concepts that you had prior?
Car-based business, like pop-ups?
Like different car-based events or business.
They mean other than Cinemauto? I mean, there are a lot of drive-ins happening all over. You know, like I said, we are different because we are showing some more independent films and also working with film festivals to highlight different stories, marginalized community stories. So I think that the programming that we're doing is different and obviously very community oriented and driven, and also bringing the whole local restaurant, local business, supporting each other during these difficult times. So, I mean, that's basically what we've seen here in LA. And I have seen businesses that do have like the walk-up that I've actually admired. There are a lot of wine shops that are doing kind of like back to the old Italian window kind of idea, where it's just like enough for your hand to come out and they just hand you a glass of wine. And so you're able to enjoy it on the streets, but there's no one right there talking to you. They're just like, here's your wine. So I actually think that's pretty cool. But it goes back to Michael's, you know, his whole concept and model, which I think is great. And it's definitely where we're going.
And jumping off that point, there's a question for Michael. Michael, what are the biggest problems or sticky points that you've seen with the pickup pod model specifically?
Pickup pod model is pretty straightforward. You just you drop a pod in an area location and somebody just gets out and picks it up. We are agnostic when it comes to people's tech stacks. So because every chain uses a different, whether they're using Olo or Charlie or whatever they're using, it's all completely different. So we just provide internet access to them. So I guess it would be communication from the time that your food's ready to the end customer and or driver and or Uber Eats or DoorDash or Grubhub or Postmates or, Deliver My Grub or whoever it is. So I think that's kind of what that they have worked out on their end. It's just getting that to the customer. So when the customer actually gets there, they know that their food's actually ready and they don't. But the good thing is they can kind of wait around a few minutes for it as well. They can just pull up in a parking spot. I think it's probably the least disruptive out of, even more so than drive-through. There's a lot of regulations that go through drive-through with that speaker and permitting and this, that, and the other. And with a permit, with a pickup window, you don't have any of that. So I think it's probably the easiest out of all of them.
Okay, interesting.
I'll add to that. So a question that I actually had for Michael was, so in San Francisco, I think that Uber basically rented like a very large kitchen somewhere in the south of Market area. And so instead of the dream that, or the vision that we've kind of been talking about of, putting these pods in parking lots and kind of dead space in malls and things like that, they basically took the model of like, okay, let's rent a kitchen that's using, I think it might have been like on a second or third story that had no foot traffic, so the rent was a little bit cheaper. And then they basically, fed in, they basically feed like, or they enable like 6 to 10 restaurants to operate out of this kitchen. And then people, basically they just use like street parking. People pull up, like fulfillment drivers pull up and get the food from basically these lockers. Have you seen this model, and like how do you think that compares to?
I'm actually fourth generation
model?
San Franciscan, and I've owned nightclubs and restaurants all through the city. I'm very familiar with it, with the whole So,
really?
Dude, that is a nightmare. Think about your parking garages. Doing anything over first story is really hard because they get trapped in there with time. Somebody actually not getting $100 ticket and going to the third or fourth floor to get food and come down makes that meal extremely expensive. If they get that driver kit. The hosted kitchens I'm seeing more and more, like groups like Zool do it fantastic, where they go in on the back end and then bring the food to the customer. We build buildings, so we've had groups want to put our pods inside of buildings. You got to bring all that up to code and do a lot of stuff rather than if you just get a piece of land and drop a pod. It's about getting in and out as fast as possible. Parking in major cities is a nightmare. And especially outside of your parking lots, right? Imagine being in a building on Bryant Street or something when a Giants game's going on and you have to go to the third floor to get somebody's food to deliver it to somebody. It will never happen. So it's a great idea. It's good that the food went out, and they were probably doing that when all of 4,000 San Francisco restaurants were full. What I like different about our model is you're not locked into a crazy lease for 5 years. Literally, you can take the pod and move it somewhere else. You might lose the cost of the utilities to connect, but you're not going to lose your livelihood behind it. And you always have an asset to sell as well. So that's kind of the pros and cons. And when you start putting kitchens, especially in San Francisco, venting is real. Venting all those kitchens out, you might have to go to the top of that building. And each one of those vents might cost you $100,000 plus per restaurant. So there's a lot of things to think about when you go up and try to make things easier that might actually make it harder.
Interesting. And just a reminder to the audience that we're getting to the end of our panel. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please add them to the chat function, and we will try and get to them before we wrap up this session. In the meantime, I am curious if, sorry, I cut out for a second. I'm curious to hear, what were some of the biggest business challenges that were unique to the pandemic that you all have faced and had to adjust your models for? I know that, Jackie, your business was born out of the pandemic, and that's where the idea came from. But for Scott and Michael, did you have to make any adjustments because of the changes that we've seen?
Scott?
Yeah. I mean, on our end, I think basically the main adjustment is there are a lot of, property owners who are really looking to continue earning the same amount of money they were pre-pandemic. So one of those is, the repurposing the parking lots as we were kind of discussing before. And I think that's kind of the main one. And that's, also a growth opportunity if we can figure out what the best way to do that is.
For us, I hate COVID, but it expanded our business 5 years. At first it was crickets. Everybody, all the pods we were building, they were like, "We'll see you fourth quarter. Hold on to them, have fun." And I was just like, "Oh." And then third quarter came around, and everybody started calling. And it was we're ready to go. And so I think that we were always not ready for COVID, but our business model just slid right into place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. And something that consumers, perhaps now more than ever, associate with car-based business is convenience. And so we've seen a lot of businesses that had not already had a strong digital infrastructure around their car-based business really scramble to build that out during the pandemic. What is the best way to really make sure that your digital infrastructure is robust enough to service your car-based business and offer the convenience that today's consumer expects in the pandemic?
Don't try to build it yourself. Partner with all the groups out there that are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing it great. It's going to cost you way too much money to do it yourself. And they're like all the people that like condense all the orders into one order and deliver. These partners are there because they're marketing for you. And you should do it yourself as well. You should like in control of your own client, but at the same time, use the marketing and the tools that are behind to streamline it. Because I think a lot of it's kind of being figured out pretty well.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think that there's actually probably, several openings in the market as far as, if people are looking to start companies and things like that. Like I recently met someone who is starting a self-storage aggregator where basically their thesis was so many of these self-storage companies are, completely offline businesses. They've never had a website, and especially during COVID where, people are just doing everything on the internet and they can't just rely on the foot traffic or people driving by to see them anymore. So they basically found this opening in the market to index all these offline businesses. So I definitely think there are probably opportunities like that to build more tech for the physical world and bring the offline world more online.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Great.
And we have another question for the audience. What are some business concepts that you've seen either around drive-in or other car-based businesses that have missed the mark, in your opinion, either because they were not digitally optimized or something about their business model was just not really what today's consumer is looking for?
I actually have a good example of this. So a lot of people really loved this service in San Francisco. Michael might know. It was called Lux Valet. Do you know about this? It's basically this service where you could basically drive anywhere, even to the dense downtown area, and instead of paying for parking, you would basically just curb, and a Lux Valet attendant would come get into the car, and find parking and basically do that. It was a great idea from the perspective of drivers who want convenience. They found out they just had really, really tough unit economics, logistics problems of making these cars, getting people to and the business kind of failed. But it's interesting because a lot of people still remember really liking that business because it drive anywhere. But yeah, so I think that's one example of make sure your business actually add up.
I guess driving pizzas to customers, or that's one, or maybe I don't know if this works still, Scott, where they're driving down the street and filling people's gas tanks, in the gas cars. That's still going on.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
Full service.
Yeah. Yeah, which might be great for some people.
I don't think
it seems
so,
like it'd be pretty
yeah,
expensive to me, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we are down to our last 2 minutes, so to pivot to a pause. Oh, and there's Luke. Do we need to wind down, Luke?
Guys, yeah, we're just coming up at the end, so I want to jump in. Great convo. I'm going to take the streaming delivery bundle idea and go get some funding for that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. I thought it was a great panel, great discussion, and I really appreciate all of your time. Emma, Jackie, Scott, Michael, that was awesome. Where can people find you? Let's start with Jackie.
My website is www.cinemauto.net, and on Instagram it's @Cinemauto_drive-in.
Cool. Scott?
Yeah, for me, you could just Google AirGarage, or you can probably find me about page or Twitter at Scott Fit.
You can access Restaurant Dive at restaurantdive.com. That's DIVE, like diving into a swimming pool. And you can also find me on Twitter at Emma K. Beckett.
And Michael.
Just go to our website, kitchenpodular.com, and go to the Contact Us page. Fill out the form, and we'll get it and get right back to you.
Seems easy. Cool, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for the great discussion. Appreciate y'all being here. Everyone who's been watching, thank you for being here too. We're going to take a networking break / lunch break. So grab some food and come on back. We're going to be under sessions in the networking tab. Yesterday, there was some really interesting conversation there. So I'm looking forward to jumping in there as well. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your day and talk soon.
Thank you, guys. Fun panel.
All right.
Thanks. Nice talking with all of you.